Chapter 16, Home. Kara POV. I don't know what I would have done without Eve. When I had first awoken from the pod, I had been confused. Then angry. Everything was so loud, and then Kal-El told me about Krypton and my parents. I almost lost it. With the strength I had now, I could cause some serious damage if I acted out in anger. But then Eve had been there. She had given me power, then she gave me compassion. As simple as that. I still wasn't sure how she had calmed me down so quickly, but she did. And then she stayed with me so I wouldn't be alone. She distracted me when my thoughts started to spiral, and she pushed me when I grew apathetic. Then, finally, she pulled me out and up. Out of the crystalline fortress that held everything I was familiar with, into a new and more exciting world. Up into the skies where the sun warmed both my body and my soul. I hadn't stopped grieving my home. I probably never would, but I could live with the grief now. When I saw the endless blue skies and sheets of white outside, I felt so stupid. I felt stupid for shutting myself, not only inside the fortress, but inside my own head. And I felt thankful. Thankful that she hadn't given up on me. She had told me about her meta-knowledge, and how a version of me had been a great hero in her comics. She had refused to give me any details, but I could tell that she admired her. That made-up version of me. A part of me had believed that she only stayed with me because she thought of me as her. That she didn't really care about me. Then she told me she didn't care who I became as long as I was happy. That I didn't have to be a hero unless I wanted to be one. Of course, now I did want to be one. If only so I could spend more time with her. Which led us to our current situation. Woodka get you, the person behind the counter in front of me said. It sounded like a question, but apparently Kryptonian isn't commonly spoken on Earth. Perdón. EYYA no habla inglés. Eve came to my rescue again, and said something to the Birizdu before turning to me and adding, he wants to know what you want. I'm not sure what you like, but I'm just getting a kaffe latte. You want the same? Okay, I agreed, not knowing what a kaffe latte was, and she took over ordering for me. A minute later I was holding a cup filled with a nice-smelling light brown liquid. I didn't know you spoke Spanish, Eve. The Martian, Megan, said as we walked to the table. This telepathic communication was a RAO send. It let me communicate with Eve's friends without speaking the language. I had been learning English over the past week, but it was slow going. I don't. Eve responded in a confused tone. Wait. I was speaking Spanish. Magical translation has some quirks, the younger girl, Zatan said while giggling. Mera said it seemed to create a minor empathic bond with whoever I was talking to, Eve said. Guess that means I automatically speak the first language of whoever I want to hear me. For some reason, Eve sounded much clearer in my head than the others. I wondered if that was because I was closer to her, or if she was just good at telepathy. Your Kryptonian is perfect, I chimed in, actively trying to be a part of the conversation. You sound like you were born and raised in Argo. But when you speak to someone else, I can't understand it. Eve turned to the tall girl, Don Na, and spoke out loud, Pazu Akugame. Perfect theme siren Greek, Don Na responded telepathically, as we all sat down around a wooden table hidden in a secluded corner of the Carve EE shop. I noted that Eve sat a little closer to me than what I had seen was normal for humans. Which was a little embarrassing, but I couldn't deny that I appreciated it. Even if I was all but invulnerable here, I felt safer when I was close to her. Mgan POV. Kara was a sweetheart. After being gone for almost 2 weeks, Eve had just shown up one day and introduced her as our new friend, Kara. None of us had any objections, of course, but we did want a bit more of an explanation. Superman had told us that they had found his cousin stuck in orbit, and that Eve was helping her adjust, but that was all. When I felt Eve's mind as she stepped out from the Mountain Zeta tube, I noticed immediately that something in her had changed. She was still Eve, cheerful, honest, and open. But there was something more as well. A sort of joyful sadness. A burden, but one she wouldn't give up on for anything. The most interesting part, though, was her budding infatuation. I didn't think she had even noticed it herself, but she cared deeply for Kara. I could feel her emotional cocktail of joy, sadness, hope, and despair when she explained Kara's situation, and I found myself hoping they would get together. Maybe I should tease her about it, as she did with me about Connor. No. I would let her discover her feelings on her own. As for Kara, she didn't want a telepathic connection like the rest, but she agreed to a link for easier communication. I didn't even need a connection to sense her anxiety, so I could understand her hesitation. Even if I couldn't sense her feelings, it was obvious that she was somewhat attached to Eve, and I suspected she felt the same way that Eve did. Again, how to say this? Kara interrupted my musings and pointed to a word in the book she was using to learn English. Oh, I think that one is pronounced gauge, I answered, happy to help her out. Thank you, she said. English is complex. Even easy reading is complex. The large-scale structure of space-time by Hawking and Ellis didn't really strike me as easy reading, but according to Eve, she was kinda smart. Apparently, Kryptonians were genetically engineered to fulfill certain roles in their society, and Kara was designed to be a scientist. No problem. I chirped happily. I don't understand any of the science in that book, but I'm pretty good at English. Just ask me if you need anything. She would usually ask Eve whenever she had a question, but since said sorceress was currently passed out and resting her head in her lap, that wasn't an option at the moment. Eve had attempted a 4th-level spell earlier. She had succeeded, but promptly passed out after teleporting across the room. According to Zatanna, she had just passed out from her mana burn and would be fine after some sleep. Thank you, Mgan, Kara said with a genuine smile before she became hesitant. I noticed that she absent-mindedly stroked her hand through Eve's hair as she searched for the words to continue. Talking is hard, she finally said. Not just the words, but the speaking. Planet dying broke something, I think. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for being a friend. I try to be better. I could only stare at her for a moment as my heart felt like it was being wrapped in a warm blanket. That was the most I had heard her say to anyone except for Eve, telepathically or verbally. She wanted to be my friend. Not just because Eve said so, but because she wanted to. Kara really was a sweetheart. Connor POV. Superman had told me about his cousin while Eve was looking after her at the fortress. Kara was a full-blooded Kryptonian. As strong, fast, and tough as Superman, and with all the same abilities. She was everything I wanted to be. I knew that I was flawed, and when Superman was the only other Kryptonian in the world, I had been able to deal with it. Now, though, I knew it wasn't her fault, but the jealousy still raged within me. I had spent most of my time at the Kents lately, hoping to avoid her. But I couldn't do that forever. Recognized, Superboy, B07. I exited the Zeta tube, and stepped through the Zeta hub, before entering the living room. There I found her, sitting on the couch reading a book with Eve resting her sleeping head in her lap. She looked up when I entered. Superboy, she said, and I was surprised by the friendly smile on her face. Eve has told me of you. She then glanced down at the girl resting in her lap before adding, she'd try another big spell and pass out. She had an accent and seemed to struggle with conjugations. A Kryptonian accent. Didn't Kryptonians use conjugations? I felt another sting of jealousy, as she displayed another skill that further cemented me as other. Not a Kryptonian. Connor, I said, determined to treat her politely. It wasn't her fault that I was lesser. Eve insists on using code names unless given explicit permission, so she probably didn't tell you my name. Ah, Con-El, then, she responded with a raised eyebrow, casually turning my human name into a Kryptonian one. A strange choice of name, but maybe human custom different. Ah, sure, I said, deciding not to correct her as I sat down on the couch opposite her. Kara, right? Superman told me about you. Yes, she answered. Kara Zor-El. Your aunt, I suppose. But Kal-El says you are more like a brother, so we are cousins as well. That surprised me. Being polite to me was one thing, but she was basically calling me family without any sign of resentment. Did she not know what I was? Do you know what I am? I asked, deciding it was better to be honest from the start. A trait I probably picked up from Eve, now that I thought about it. Yes, she said without missing a beat. You are born of Kal-El and a human man. I am a clone, I admitted, a little confused. Did she think human men could give birth? Ah, yes, she said with a small frown. Humans call all synthetic births clones. Then she muttered almost to herself, should I call myself a clone? What? What? I asked, taken completely off guard. You're a clone too. Huh? She looked back at me before answering, from a human perspective, yes. All Kryptonians are synthetic births. Except Kal-El. Uncle Jor-El and Aunt Lara were eccentric. Kal-El first natural birth in many centuries. I was stunned. Kryptonians were all clones, and Superman was the odd one out. I had thought myself an abomination because of my creation, but if it was the common way for Kryptonians to be born, then monogenic clone is a crime, Kara kept explaining. Forbidden after the Clone Wars. But binary clone in synthetic womb is much safer than natural birth. Not the same thing. But to humans, it is the same thing. Confusing. But you are Kryptonian. Not a clone. Just synthetic birth. Like me. I'm only half Kryptonian, I blurted out. I'm not as strong as you, and I can't fly or use heat vision. I had been practicing with M'gan, and we had managed to unlock my telekinesis. It only worked on myself and things I touched, just like Eve had said, but it had made me stronger. Not nearly as strong as a full Kryptonian, though, and I still couldn't fly, so I kept feeling flawed. Kara was rapidly battering away my self-doubts, though. Yes, she said with a frown as she looked at her hands, and I blanched when she continued, you're lucky. Flying is good, but strength is. Then her brows evened out, and she looked at me again and said, and you're not the first Kryptonian hybrid. Not common, but before isolation it happened sometimes. Part Kryptonian is still Kryptonian. Old law, never changed. First in a long time, but not first in history. Kal-El has a girlfriend, so happen again soon, I hope. My whole life, short as it was, I had felt like I shouldn't exist. Like I was unnatural. Like I was incomplete. But now, in one short conversation with a true Kryptonian, one who had actually grown up on Krypton, all my doubts and feelings of inferiority had been cast aside. Binary cloning was just how Kryptonians were born. Hybrids happened when they weren't isolated, and according to Kryptonian law, I was a Kryptonian. Not half Kryptonian, or a hybrid or an abomination. Just Kryptonian. My heart felt lighter than I had ever felt, and I smiled at her more genuinely than I thought I was capable of. Thank you, I said. I didn't know. Knowledge must be learned, she said with a sage nod. How about I help you with that? I suggested. And maybe you could teach me some Kryptonian too. She gave me a happy smile and accepted my offer. Chapter 17, First Mission. Eve POV. Kara was settling in well in the mountains. She wasn't on the team, not yet, at least, but this really was the best place for her to stay. Where else would you find a bunch of teenage aliens and superpowered humans? I had been conked out from mana burn for most of the past week from trying to break through to the 4th level spells, so I had missed most of it, but Kara and Ngan had gotten pretty close. She had even allowed a telepathic connection by the end of the week, despite her initial reservations. Kara also seemed to have had a massive effect on Connor. He had mellowed out after getting closer with Superman, but he still had some anger issues and seemed a little depressed most of the time. Now he was like a completely different person. After waking up from my mana burn knockouts, I would find him laughing with Kara, and the rest of the team also got along fine with Kara. Wally, of course, appreciated the presence of another beautiful girl, and her personality meshed well with Robin and Roy as well. Donna was ecstatic about having someone stronger than her to train with, and Kara was happy to have someone who wouldn't break while she practiced controlling her strength in a fight. She had gotten pretty good at it during the week we spent in the fortress, but combat situations were more challenging. She had also joined the team's training sessions. I was still the only one who could actually beat her since I had my magic, but the rest of the team appreciated having the chance to find ways of dealing with someone so overwhelmingly strong. Calder could damage her since his attacks were magical in nature, but not quickly enough to actually defeat her before she knocked him from the ring. There had been a few bruises and even broken bones that I had to fix with cure wounds, but everyone was quick to reassure her that they were fine. Kara really didn't like hurting people. She was determined to join us though, so she worked hard on controlling her strength. Recognized, Batman, 02. Everyone except Kara jolted to their feet when the Zeta Tube announced Batman's arrival. We had all been hanging around in the kitchen, a living room absorbed in our own activities. I was practicing spells, Kara was reading her book, while Ngan and Connor had been in the kitchen baking cookies, and Wally had been ignorantly third-wheeling them. "What's going on?" Kara asked. Her English had really improved. She still had an accent, but other than that she was pretty much fluent. "Batman doesn't make social visits," Wally explained, his voice full of excitement. "If he's here, then he's got a mission for us." "Come on," I said as she slumped back down on the couch with a resigned look on her face. "You live here, so you have the right to sit in on briefings at least." Her face brightened as she took my outstretched hand and followed me to the briefing room. The rest of the team had been in other places around the base, so they met up with us in the hallway. Batman stood in his usual menacing pose, wearing his usual menacing frown as we lined up to be briefed. He eyed Kara as we entered, but didn't comment. When we had all lined up, a screen flickered to life behind him, and he began the briefing. "This is Crescent Creek, Idaho," he started without any preamble, and the screen showed images of a quaint, rural American town. A few weeks ago, locals noticed strange things started happening. Unexplained lights and sounds, keys disappearing, that sort of thing. Until recently, it seemed like someone was doing harmless pranks, but it seems to have escalated, he said as the screen shifted to show a car crash. Broken windows, falling electrical wires. The last occurrence was a car crash where the brakes seemed to have been severed. Only the driver had some minor injuries, but this indicates a trend. If it continues, it's only a matter of time before someone gets seriously hurt or killed. Your mission is to go to Crescent Creek, investigate, discover what is causing these disturbances, and stop it. Any questions? Will we have full mission control? Roy asked. You have the mission parameters, Batman said. How you complete it is up to you. Can Kara come? I asked, and all eyes turned to me. Supergirl is not a part of the team yet, Batman said, using her new code name. But that wasn't a no. Because of a lack of experience with Earth and her own powers, I pressed. This mission sounds low risk, and will most likely require more social interactions and investigation than combat. Since this team is aimed at training us, it seems like an ideal opportunity for her to gain said experience. Granted, he said, and I swear I could see a small twitch in the corner of his lips before he turned to Kara, whose eyes had widened. Supergirl, you will observe and listen to your teammates' orders. Do not act on your own initiative, and avoid aggressive confrontations. Any further questions? He asked as he turned to the rest of the group. When none were forthcoming, he said, very well. Dismissed. Before heading towards the Zeta Hub. Recognized, Batman, 02. Eve? Kara turned to me with a frown. I'm not sure I'm ready for this. Batman thinks you are, I responded with a shrug and a grin. In the end, it's up to the team. And if you don't want to come, you don't have to. But I think you should come. I see no issues, Calder said. Batman gave us mission control and permission to bring Supergirl. With our team leader in agreement, no one else had any objections either. Here, put these on, I said and handed Kara a pair of prescriptionless glasses. Your disguise. I don't think a pair of glasses is gonna be much of a disguise, Wally commented from beside me. You'd be surprised, I retorted with a smirk, and Connor chuckled from his seat next to Mgan. Kara also smiled as she accepted the disguise. Mgan had turned the bioship into a classic hippie van for our approach to Crescent Creek. Since Roy was the only one with a driver's license, he was seated in the driver's seat, but Mgan could control the ship-turned van from anywhere inside. We were all wearing civilian disguises, which was basically just ordinary clothes for most of us. I was maintaining disguise self, making me look like my pre-Tiefling self. Mgan had done the same and changed her skin into a more human shade. The trip through the Coeur d'Alene National Forest was pretty fun. After some research, we had decided to start in Spokane and approach Crescent Creek as tourists. Since tourists didn't typically travel in Martian spaceships, it meant an hours-long drive before we reached our destination. Watching Kara was more than enough to keep me entertained for the drive. Krypton didn't have any forests, being mostly desolate outside of the cities, so this was her first time seeing this many trees. The childlike fascination in her eyes was priceless, and I found myself just staring at her with a smile for most of the ride. Crescent Creek itself was exactly what we expected. An old mining town that had transitioned into a tourist trap as the silver in the ground ran out. In addition to the obligatory mining museum, an enterprising soul had decided to open a pinecone museum. Other than that, there were a few cozy restaurants and a motel for travelers. We checked into the creatively named Crescent Motel and split the rooms into boys and girls. The boys got 2 rooms since they apparently needed more space. We girls were more than happy with sharing 2 double beds. So far, this trip felt more like an actual road trip than a mission. All right, first impressions. Calder asked as we gathered in the room he shared with Roy. Nothing suspicious stands out so far, Robin reported. But I noticed a few people looked tired. More than you'd expect from a lazy town like this. I've been keeping detect magic active since we entered town, I said. There seems to be some magical activity around here. I'll need a closer look at some spots to tell more. Detect magic didn't work quite like it did in D&D. Rather than just reacting to spells and magic items, I could see ambient mana. If I saw a magical item or a spell being cast, I would get an impression of what it did. Spells would also leave traces in the mana, so I could see if a spell had been cast in the past few days, or weeks, if the conditions were right. People are worried, Mgan noted. Their surface emotions are a mix of worry and some actual fear. I couldn't hear much, but the people are talking in hushed voices, Connor added and looked towards Kara before adding, did you hear anything? Your hearing is better than mine. I'm sorry, Kara responded, looking embarrassed. I try to filter it out since it gets too loud if I don't. But I'll try to focus. It's fine, Calder said reassuringly and put a hand on her shoulder. No one expects you to master your abilities this quickly. Give it a shot, but don't worry about it if it becomes too much. All right. He turned to the group as a whole. Split into pairs and investigate. Remember, we are undercover as tourists. You know your own strengths, use them. Dismissed? Calder paired up with Roy, and Donna got saddled with Worley while Robin preferred to move on his own. Ngene's feelings were a bundle of nervousness and excitement as she got a date with Connor. That left me with Kara, which I was more than happy with. So, I said, turning to her as we were standing outside the motel. Did Kryptonian education happen to include investigation as a subject? 'Cause I'm a bit lost right now. Chapter 18, Investigation. Kara POV. Kryptonian education did actually include quite a bit about investigation. Not criminal investigation, like what we were technically doing now, but scientific investigation. Earth had a similar concept in what they called the scientific method. The Kryptonian version was a lot more complex, but I found that I liked the simplicity of the Earthen version. Question, research, hypothesis, experiment, data analysis, conclusion, and communication. It didn't quite translate into what we were doing right now, but for Eve and me it would serve as a guideline. Eve had commented that Batman should have really given us some training in criminal investigations. The question was what is causing trouble in Crescent Creek, and initial research indicated that there was unusual magical energy in the area. Our experiment would be to search the town more thoroughly for signs of magic use, which was basically just more research. As I said, it didn't quite translate. Yep. A spell was definitely cast on this recently, Eve said as she looked at the car that was wrecked in the recent accident, her eyes glowing faintly. It shows as transmutation magic, which could definitely be used to cut the brakes. Eve had used a spell to turn us both invisible, so we could sneak into the impound lot. She kept her detection spell up as we walked through town and had found several traces of magic being cast, mostly illusion spells, apparently. The sabotaged car was the most serious incident, though, so we had to verify that magic had been involved in that as well. My phone vibrated as Eve informed the rest of the team of our discovery. When Eve had handed me the earthen version of a communicator a few days after we had moved into MT, Justice, I was a little surprised at how much more advanced it was than most of the other Earth tech I had seen. Considering how social they were as a species, though, it made sense that communications technology was a big focus of research and development. Arcana, magic used on car. Probably sabotage. Illusion magic around town too. Could explain lights and sounds. Troya, the Pinecone Museum was vandalized last night. Sensing magic is not my specialty. Would you mind joining us to verify that magic has been used here as well? Arcana, OMW. You got that? Eve asked as we both looked up from our phones. Yes, I confirmed. Pinecone Museum. Yeah, she said with a nod. Let's just fly there. We've already confirmed that someone's using magic around town, so there's no point wasting time. Won't someone see us? I asked. We are supposed to be undercover, no. Not if we go invisible, she answered with a grin. I smiled back and grabbed her extended hand. We had discovered earlier that keeping physical contact made keeping track of each other much easier when we were invisible. I could see through the invisibility with my X-ray vision, but I quite liked holding hands with her, so I didn't mind. A few minutes later, we landed in an empty alleyway next to the Pinecone Museum, and became visible again. The museum was in a more populated area than the impound lot, so we had to be more careful about being seen. The streets weren't exactly crowded, but two girls appearing out of thin air was bound to be noticed. Donna and Wally were waiting for us outside the museum. We approached them, and Wally raised an eyebrow as he saw us. "Enjoying your date?" he asked and glanced at our still connected hands. I quickly pulled back my hand and felt a blush spread across my cheeks, but Eve just smiled brightly and answered, "The impound lot wasn't exactly romantic, but the company more than made up for it." Which caused me to blush even more. Why did that make me so happy? Eve POV. Kara's blush made my day. I wasn't blind to the direction my feelings for her were growing. She was kind, honest, and curious. While she was serious most of the time, she had a mischievous sense of humor that was starting to show more and more. Not to mention she was both beautiful and cute as a button. In other words, she was exactly my type. We had spent almost every waking moment together since she emerged from her pod, even sleeping together when we lived at the fortress. When we moved to the mountain, she got her own room, of course, but we still spent most of our time together. I was getting a little worried that she was getting too attached to me, though. If she was growing emotionally dependent on me, needing me to stay stable, that would be really bad. The way she always moved to be physically close to me, coupled with things like the blush she just made me think she was interested in me romantically. But because of my own feelings, I really couldn't trust my own judgment on this. I needed to talk to Dinah about this. But for now, we were on a mission. Donna seemed to agree. "That's nice, but perhaps we should focus on the task ahead," she said with an amused smile, as she gestured toward the entrance to the museum beside us. "Gotcha," I said, and headed inside. The Pinecone Museum was actually more of a store than a museum. While one half of the room had displays of, admittedly impressive, sculptures made out of mostly pine cones, the other half was filled with souvenirs for sale. Most of it was typical touristy stuff like posters and mugs, but there was a section where they had smaller pinecone sculptures for sale. Rather obviously, this was where the vandalism had taken place. Behind a cordon of police tape, the pinecone animal sculptures were all arranged in creative positions. Most were displayed in the middle of sexual activities, but there was also what looked like a cult sacrifice, and something I assumed to be a fight club. I honestly found it kinda hilarious and thought they should keep it as an official display, but it wasn't exactly family-friendly, so I doubted they would. "Welcome to the Crescent Creek Pinecone Museum," a chipper voice called out from my right as Kara and the others entered behind me. I turned my head and found that it came from a short-haired brunette behind a counter with a name tag that said Millie. She looked to be about my age, maybe early 20s. "Hey, Millie," I said with a bright smile. Service workers usually got treated like shit, so I always made a point of treating them nicely. "Heard you had a new display, so I came to check it out." Her eyes widened in surprise for a second before she glanced down at her name tag and seemed to give herself a mental facepalm. Then she gave me a crooked smile and said with good-natured sarcasm, behind the police cordon, "Limited time only." "Man. Must be my lucky day," I said with a laugh as I walked over to her. "Famous artist. Banksy maybe." "PFF," she scoffed, and her demeanor shifted slightly, clearly having recognized me as a fellow appreciator of sarcasm. As if Banksy would visit a hole like this. Nah, bunch of weird shit's been happening all round town lately. My guess is it's just a bunch of kids trying to make the place a little more interesting. Have they? I asked. Made it more interesting, I mean. I suppose, she said with a shrug. Could do without the laser light shows at 2 a.m. though. School takes more than enough of my sleep as it is, thank you very much. I feel YA. I gave her a sympathetic smile. Bet the guy whose car got wrecked doesn't appreciate the humor as much either. Pre-TTY sure that doesn't count as a prank, she said doubtfully and raised an eyebrow. How'd you even figure it's the same guy responsible? Pretty big leap, no? Come on, I said with a scoff. Small town like this. Doubt anything happens around here most of the time. Then someone starts an escalating pranking spree, and a guy gets his brakes sabotaged in the middle of it. What's more likely, they are connected, or two interesting things happen in this town at the same time. PFF, she laughed. Yeah, you got a point. Still, poorly timed pranks and attempted murder ain't the same thing. Especially since the harmless pranks VE kept on after. She gestured to the new display to illustrate her point. What kind of maniac puts car crashes at the same level as that? Fair enough, I conceded, but her words had given me an idea. An idea I'd have to discuss with the team later, preferably with Zatanna on a call. I kept shooting the shit with Millie for a while. Partly to be polite, and partly because she seemed really nice. After she dropped the bombshell that she was studying art in Metropolis, we even exchanged numbers. Besides, Dinah's been telling me to find a friend outside the superhero business. Donna POV. That was impressive, I said as we were walking back towards the motel. What? Eve asked, sounding a little confused. It's just a spell from my book. I can't really take credit for how it works. Then she frowned and added, besides, you've seen me use it before. While your magic is certainly impressive as well, that was not what I was referring to, I said with a fond smile. I was referring to how effectively you gathered information from Millie. She looked even more confused as she said, but I just talked to her. What's so impressive about that? She seemed nice. I shook my head in fond exasperation. Did she truly not realize her own talent? Even Diana could not gather information so effectively without the use of the lasso of truth. Making someone comfortable enough to answer questions freely was no mean feat, and Eve had done it without even thinking about it. Then again, she wasn't really trying either. She was just having a friendly conversation with a nice girl. Did you find any traces of magic? I asked, changing the subject. Huh? That extremely expressive face of hers shifted from confusion to realization. Oh? Yeah, definitely magic. Can't really tell if it's the same thing that has been casting spells all around town, though. Then she donned a crooked, smug smirk. But I did have an idea. Gonna have to ask Zatanna if there's any merit to it, but I might know what's causing all of this. And you're not telling us now because... Wally hedged. Because I want to be dramatic about it, Eve answered with blunt honesty, which caused Wally to burst out laughing. All right, he accepted. I can respect that. This girl. She made me wish I shared the proclivities of most of my sisters. I could not deny that her personality was highly attractive to me. Unfortunately, I was unable to muster any sexual attraction. Although even if I could, I do believe I would have to get in line, as they say. That girl. Millie, Kara hedged nervously. You like her? Sure, Eve answered a little unsurely. I wondered if she was oblivious to the effect she had on the young Kryptonian. She seemed nice, and Dinah said I should try and get some friends outside the hero gig. Then she casually grabbed Kara's hand and said, but I can't imagine us ever being as close as I am with you, proving that no, she was not oblivious. It was convenient that you applied both to the singular and plural in English. The blush and small smile that crossed Kara's face was heartwarming. You talk with Dinah a lot? Wally asked, a little surprised. Fortunately, he did not seem to have noticed the sweet gesture. Yeah, Eve answered, seemingly relieved at the change of topic. I managed to hijack her as my personal therapist. We meet up every couple of weeks. PFF. Wally scoffed and raised an eyebrow. Why would you need a therapist? The clear disdain he had for mind healers was discouraging. But Eve once again had an answer that put him in his place. "We run around dressed in spandex picking fights with criminals," she said in a completely monotone voice. "We all need therapy." Touché. I found myself biting my lip to prevent laughter from escaping my mouth. Chapter 19, Searching for a Fairy Tale. Eve POV. "Eve? What's going on?" Zatanna's voice came from the laptop standing on the table where we had set up a video call. "We are on a mission and kinda need a magical consultant," I explained. "My knowledge is kinda limited, so we called an expert, you." Her eyes widened, and her mouth dropped open slightly before she asked, "Me? You are a talented magician with ties to the Justice League, and Arcana speaks highly of your knowledge," Calder said in a serious tone. "Are you willing to assist us? We will arrange for you to be compensated for your troubles." "No," Zatanna exclaimed. "I mean yes." Then she composed herself and clarified, "Yes, I'll help if I can. But I don't need anything. I want to help." "Then we thank you for your assistance," Calder said with a nod before turning to me. "Arcana, if you would please explain your theory." "All right," I said and cleared my throat. Ahem. So, the town has been plagued by what can be described as magical pranks. Mysterious lights and noises, things disappearing and reappearing in strange places, harmless vandalism. Calder, Robin, and Roy had all been asking around and had gotten more accounts of what had been happening. It was more of the same, harmless, but annoying pranks. Ngan had also confirmed that most of the townspeople were more worried and annoyed than anything. There were some fearful people, but they were a minority. "The police don't have any suspects," Robin interjected. "I hacked their records, and they seem to think it's just some local kids. They don't even consider the car crash to be related." "It's a bit of a leap," Roy agreed. "Pranks are one thing. Cutting someone's brakes is attempted murder." "Is it, though?" I asked with a small smirk, and everyone turned to me. "I don't know how much you know about physics," Wally said in a condescending tone. "But when a moving thing hits a not moving thing, something goes boom. Car crashes kill people. Everyone knows that." He sounded crass, almost hostile, but I knew he didn't actually intend for it to be mean-spirited, so I let it pass. He really needed to work on that personality flaw, or someone was going to punch him one of these days. What if they don't understand the concept of death? I hedged. "A child," Robin said skeptically. "Anyone too young to understand the concept of death would be too young to do all of this. Remember, there's magic involved," I reminded them. "So, if we assume the perpetrator is magical in nature and doesn't understand the concept of death, we get." "You're dealing with a fae," Zatanna said with a wince. "You're not gonna have a fun time dealing with that, that's for sure." "Bingo," I said, but then I added, "Well, I don't know for sure, but it would make sense." The car was affected by a spell, same as the display at the museum. Unless there are two people with very similar magic and very dissimilar attitudes running around here, it's the same person. Or creature, if I'm right. "Hold on," Wally interjected. "Are we just gonna accept that there is a literal fairy tale creature doing this?" He looked around the room. "I mean, come on. Guys? We can't assume until we have definite proof," Calder said. "But from what little I know of them, it does seem a plausible assumption." "I have a spell that can locate fae within 30 feet, I said, having summoned my book and checked the details of Detect Evil and Good. "The rest of you can continue other lines of investigation, while I continue this one." I was convinced that my deduction was right and that we were dealing with a fae, but I had to admit that I could be wrong. Abandoning all other lines of investigation would be foolish. Even if the town was small, searching all of it in 30-foot sections would take a while. Having the rest just sitting on their thumbs while I did that would be a waste. I was hoping I didn't have to search the whole town, though. I don't know much about Fae, though, I said, turning towards Zatanna. Do you know anything we should be aware of? Any ideas where I should start looking? I had never seen Zatanna as proud as she looked when she started relaying what she knew about Fae. Her face lit up with an excited smile as she said, "1 sec," and ran off to get a book from the bookshelf behind her. Fortunately, she had taken the call in the Shadowcrest library. With a new understanding of what we were potentially up against, we set out to search. This time, Donna joined Kara and me, and Robin got saddled with Worley. If we did encounter a Fae, having another magical combatant for protection would be reassuring. Especially after Zatanna's impromptu lesson on Fae. As I suspected, Fae were rarely malevolent. When they interacted with mortals, it was more often than not in a friendly manner. Any harm caused was usually because they simply didn't have the capability to understand how humans worked. They did like messing with people's minds, though, which Kara was very vulnerable to. Having Donna, who had the best natural magical protection out of all of us, around helped put my mind more at ease. Having the excuse to avoid the awkward conversation I knew that I needed to have with Kara was just a bonus. The park would be a natural first place to look. Donna's voice interrupted my musings. Zatanna said they prefer natural areas. The town is pretty close to the forest, though, Kara noted. Wouldn't that be even more natural? Yeah, I agreed. But it's a smaller area, so we might as well check it out first. I summoned the Maginomicon and quickly found the page for Detect Evil and Good. It was a low-level spell, so it was relatively easy to cast, but I had never practiced it before. I formed the mental rune constructs and fed it mana. The spell activated and my head whipped to Donna, as I got an immediate response. "Huh," I mused. "Yeah, guess that makes sense." "What?" Donna asked, a little self-conscious as I studied her. "You're showing up as a celestial being," I answered. Not really a surprise, all things considered. But it does pretty much confirm that you have divine parentage. "I see," she said with a thoughtful expression. Then she gave me an appreciative smile and said, "Thank you. It is good to finally have our suspicions confirmed." "You're welcome," I said. Then I grinned as something occurred to me. "Although, you should wait until the next time we spar before you thank me. This revelation gives me a few options." Donna and I had sparred a few times before, both by ourselves and as team practice. I was the only one who could hold my own against her for any significant amount of time, using Misty Step to stay mobile, and a shield to deflect her attacks. I'd never been able to beat her, though, and now I was hoping protection from evil and good might give me the edge I needed to actually fight back. She didn't seem worried and just grinned back at me as she said, "Good. I shall look forward to the challenge." "Battle maniac," I muttered with a fond laugh. Of course she would react like that. We headed to the park and searched it thoroughly. Unsurprisingly, we didn't find any Fae in the small semi-natural area. Since it was getting a little too late to start searching the surrounding forests, we decided to just call it a day. Ngan and Connor decided to get dinner on their own, and the boys did the same, so the three of us had to make our own arrangements. The little town had a surprising amount of restaurants, so we had plenty to choose from. We were walking through what could pass for a shopping district, looking for a place that appealed to us, when we heard a voice call out from behind us. "Hey, Eve." I felt Kara move slightly closer to me, as we turned and saw Millie walking towards us, with a tired smile on her face. She had changed out of her work uniform, and was wearing a simple white summer dress. "Hey, Millie," I greeted her with a smile. "Off work?" "Yeah," she answered with a tired sigh. "You'd be surprised how tiring it is to just stand around doing nothing all day. It is the middle of summer, Donna interjected politely. Is this not the busiest time of year for the tourist industry? Yeah, she agreed, and I could feel that her next words would be prime sarcasm. Today was especially busy. The number of visitors was 300% higher today compared to what it usually is. We were the only visitors today, weren't we? I asked deadpan. Bingo, she answered with a sigh. I have no idea how that place survives. Sometimes I'm afraid I'm an unwitting part of a money laundering scheme or something. Anyway, she continued, more enthusiastically. I never got introduced to the rest of you. I'm Millie, nice to meet you. Kara, the girl at my side answered and hesitantly grabbed Millie's outstretched hand. And I am Donna. It is good to make your acquaintance, Millie. Donna was, as usual, far more jovial in her greeting as she confidently introduced herself. We were just about to find a place to eat. Would you like to join us? Millie looked a little taken aback at Donna's enthusiasm, but happily responded, yeah, sure. Nice to meet you, Kara, Donna. Know where you're eating yet? You're the local expert, I said with a grin, happy to leave the decision to someone else. Lead the way. Deciding where to eat was always a nightmare. She eyed me with mock suspicion, telling me she knew exactly what I was up to, but acquiesced. Fine. Asian sounds good. Morris makes the best ramen, well, the best you'll find in this place, at least. It's also the only ramen place here, so Tilda, but it's good. I promise. With that ringing endorsement, we headed out. Stomachs rumbling in the afternoon sun. Chapter 20, Confessions. Eve POV. Morris, as it turned out, was actually a hole in the wall called Mori no Tabemino, which a quick Google search translated into forest food. It was owned and run by a middle-aged Japanese guy called Junichiro, but apparently everyone just called him Morris. He had ridden the wave of interest in Japanese culture that followed the anime boom of the early 2000s, and his ramen shop had become a popular hangout for the local youth. Donna was the type who wasn't good at approaching new people, but had no problems once introductions were made. Millie quickly adjusted to Donna's boisterous personality, and the three of us chatted happily. We all tried to include Kara as well, but she was acting withdrawn and stayed even closer to me than usual, making sure we were always maintaining some form of physical contact. I realized, or suspected, at least, what was going on. She was jealous. I'd felt the way I suspected she felt now, and it wasn't a nice feeling. Fortunately, Millie started to complain about her boyfriend at some point, which seemed to ease some of Kara's worries. This was still something we really needed to talk about, though, and soon. I wanted to talk about it with Dinah first so I wouldn't step on any landmines, but my gut told me I didn't have time for that. Feelings had a tendency to fester far faster than any wound. Naturally, Millie was curious about us. Of course, we had agreed on cover stories before we even came here, so we were ready for that. I hated lying, so luckily I was able to get the whole team to agree to cover stories that required as little lying as possible. Our parents knew each other from work, and we had all met at a social gathering between colleagues. They worked in security, of course. We hit it off, and had been friends ever since. This summer, we were hanging out together, and decided to go on a road trip. Simple, and relatively truthful. Why come here of all places, though? Millie wondered. Sissy isn't exactly the center of the universe. That'd be Wallace, a few miles that way. She gestured vaguely towards the south. We like a good mystery, I explained. Someone on Reddit mentioned the pranking streak happening here, so we decided to check it out. Besides, Wallace is pretty stupid. Donna choked on her ramen as she fought back a laugh, and even Kara made a soft snort at my double entendre. Millie didn't seem to have noticed, though. Of course. Millie exclaimed in realization. You were asking about that earlier. Got any leads yet? A few, I hedged. All we really have so far points to it being something magical in nature. While not exactly common, magic was a known factor in this universe. With half the Justice League's powers having magical origin, it was only natural. Most people accepted that it existed, but surprisingly few actually sought it out or knew anything about it. People like Wally, who straight up refused to accept what was right in front of them, were a minority. Millie raised her eyebrows in surprise. Really? She asked. How can you tell? Do you know magic? Her eyes grew wider as she spoke, realizing the implications of what I had revealed. I just gave her a mysterious smile and said, maybe. Oh, come on, she exclaimed, clearly not satisfied with my answer. We are friends, right? Sure, I admitted, but with a smug smile, I continued, but we've only known each other for like half a day. You can't expect me to spill all my secrets right off the bat. Give and take, Millie. Give and take. She narrowed her eyes, glaring at me for a moment before seemingly deciding on something. All right, she said. See that alley over there? She gestured towards an alleyway a few blocks down the street. Yeah? I hedged, wondering where this was going. When I was 17, that's where I lost my virginity. His name was Morgan. He's an ass, and it's my biggest regret. Now spill. Give and take. After that, I would. Or, at least I would later. When I was finished laughing my ass off. Not just at Millie's blunt admission, but also at the synchronized spray of ramen from Donna and Kara. It was beautiful. Kara POV. I felt weird. I felt a lot of other things as well, jealousy, guilt, shame, anxiety, but it all culminated in a sensation that I could only describe as weird. I had liked Eve since day one, when I first emerged from my pod. But it was only today that I realized how much I liked her. Millie was great. She was funny, friendly, and charmingly blunt. If anything, she reminded me of Eve. It really wasn't a surprise how they got along so well. Which made the fact that I just couldn't seem to like her almost shameful. I knew why I felt like this, of course. I was jealous. Ever since I saw Eve chatting so happily with Millie in the museum, it felt like something cold and sharp had taken hold of my heart, and was slowly twisting it. The rest of the day, I needed to be close to her. When she grabbed my hand afterwards, it was like the cold and sharp had been replaced by something warm and soft. Later, when we ran into Millie while looking for a place to eat, an uncomfortable pressure started squeezing inside my chest again. The relief I felt when she revealed that she had a boyfriend was what finally made me realize what I was actually feeling. I was in love. On Krypton, love wasn't really considered all that important. Sure, parents and children loved each other, and some spouses fell in love. Uncle Jor-El and Aunt Lara were good examples. Most of the time, though, relationships were transactional. In my short time here on Earth, I had become familiar with how Earthlings thought of love. To them, it was something to strive for, something worth spending a lifetime searching for. To me, it seemed silly. How could a simple feeling be that important? Now I understand. I'm not sure I liked it much, though. Every moment I spent away from Eve felt like I had just emerged from my pod and learned of Krypton's fate. Every time she touched me, I felt like I did when she took me out to fly in the sun for the first time. My heart was spiraling out of control, and I was helpless to do anything about it. When we were heading back to the motel and Eve asked me, "Hey, Kara, can we talk for a bit?" and waved for Donna, who was wearing a smug smile on her face, to go on without us, my pulse was racing 1,000 miles per minute. All I could answer was, yes, as I felt my cheeks flush. It didn't help that she also grabbed my hand before leading me towards the small park we had been through earlier. My mind was numb, and I could barely form a coherent thought as she led me to a secluded bench and sat us down, not touching, but still comfortably close together. I wanted to scooch over the last few inches, but restrained myself. A second later I noticed a faint shimmer in the air around us before Eve let her disguise drop. "I think I want to be myself right now," she commented lightly as I took in her true form for the first time since this morning. This was what she had looked like when I had first met her, and most of the time since then. This was what she looked like most of the time. This was the Eve I knew. But for some reason, it felt like I was seeing her for the first time. And she was beautiful. I gazed at the way her silky, black hair moved in the light evening breeze behind her curved horns. The way her modest chest rose and fell as she breathed. I followed her breath up her slender throat to her soft, purple lips. I noticed that even in this charged atmosphere, a slight grin seemed permanently fixed in the corner of her mouth. Her cheeks were graced by a dark purple blush, mirroring the red in mine. Her dreamy red eyes were staring into the night sky with a distant look, as if she was looking past the stars themselves. We sat there in silence for several minutes. I was almost shaking with anticipation as I waited for her to speak. It was obvious that she had something important to say, and considering how badly I had hidden my feelings today, I had a strong suspicion as to what she wanted to talk about. What would she say? Would she reject me? Feel the same? I felt like I had reached the edge of insanity before I finally got my answer. "I like you, Kara," she said with a resigned sigh, and my heart felt like the sun. "Like, a lot. More than anyone else. I think I'm seriously falling for you." A few seconds went by before I finally found my voice again. "Me too," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. I like you too. A lot." I almost said love, but I knew that was a word that should be reserved for when you were sure about your feelings. I was sure, but I didn't want to seem clingy or desperate. Eve had said like, so I used the same word. I kinda figured," she said with a bashful grin. "You haven't exactly been subtle today." I felt my cheeks flush even harder as I looked down and stammered, "I am sorry," but Eve abruptly grabbed my face and forced me to look her in the eyes. Well, not forced exactly. If I didn't want to move, she wasn't nearly strong enough to move me. But I let her. My heart skipped a beat as I gazed into her intense scarlet eyes. "Don't be sorry," she insisted with a completely serious voice. "Never apologize for being this damn adorable." I could only manage a slight nod, and she let me go before leaning back and starting to gaze silently back into the sky. This time though, there was no space between us. Our sides were touching, and she had her arm wrapped around my shoulders, holding me tightly. I was leaning against her shoulder, listening to her heartbeat. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the full moon slowly rise in the clear night sky. Most of the anxiety of the day had been washed away, and in its wake I could feel a peaceful sort of giddiness settle over me. In that moment, I had everything I wanted. Well, almost. "Eve?" I asked nervously. She replied in an aloof tone. I had never stopped to consider just how cool she was. "Will you be my girlfriend?" "Ha," she let out a single laughing bark that surprised me. It took a few moments before she gave me a response in a somewhat somber tone. "At this point, I don't think I can refuse." That wasn't a no. But it wasn't a yes either. What did she mean? I said after a few moments, the uncertainty nagging at me. "Is that a yes, then?" She sighed, and it took a few beats before she spoke again. "You know, I had a pretty shitty childhood," she said. "My dad left before I can remember, and my mom drank herself to death when I was young. My brother and I were taken in by my grandma, but she was an abusive bitch." This was a part of Eve I didn't know about. I had asked her a few times about her childhood, but she had always avoided the question. I knew she was from another reality, and had been transferred here after she died, and I knew she preferred this world over her old one, but I had never gotten an answer as to why that was. Before I could consider this any further, she spoke again. When I got old enough, I moved out and got my shit sorted out, she said. I was smart enough to know that my life had been pretty fucked up, so I went to see a therapist. You know what a therapist is, right? I nodded, but didn't say anything. Mental illnesses were rare on Krypton, but it did happen. Right, she continued. Well, it helped. A lot. I'm not sure I'll ever be completely fine. I still fixate on other people's happiness more than my own, and I can get pretty hysterical if I fuck something up too badly. But it's a lot better than it used to be. That explained a few things. Eve always tried to make sure the people around her were happy. I had thought it was just how she was, but maybe she did it on purpose. Kal-El had also told me she had been freaked out when she realized that she had forgotten about me, and she had apologized to me repeatedly when we stayed at the fortress. I didn't hold it against her, of course. She was in a new world with a lot of things happening around her. If it were me, well, I had been completely useless after emerging from my pod. Still would be, if Eve hadn't taken care of me. Anyway, she continued, drawing me once again from my musings. My therapist warned me that getting into a relationship could be problematic. She scratched her chin awkwardly. Being a people pleaser can apparently make a relationship really toxic. My heart pounded in my chest. Was she rejecting me? I mean, I could understand it after what she had told me, but I should be fine now, though, she interrupted my panicking thoughts. But I am kinda worried about you. What? I blinked in surprise. That was not what I had expected. You've been through a lot, she explained. If it were me in your place, I don't know if I would have ever been able to leave the fortress. But you saved me, I said, confused about where this was going. She had saved me. She had dragged me out and made me happier than I ever thought I could be again. Why was she worried about me? Yeah, she agreed with a sort of pained pride. I kinda did. Thing is, if it were me in your place, I would definitely develop some kind of savior attachment, or whatever it's called. I was starting to understand what she was trying to say. And I could see where she was coming from. Eve was my anchor. Without her, I would probably drift off into oblivion. But was that really where my feelings were coming from? No. No, it may have nudged me in her direction, but I fell in love with the kind-hearted girl beside me because of who she was, not what she did for me. I don't think that's where my feelings are coming from, I said softly. I fell for a kind girl, not a savior. The warmth of her smile rivaled the sun, and I could see her eyes get blurry before she responded. Maybe, she allowed. But it's not just about you either. She made a self-deprecating smile before continuing, as I tried to say, I'm not exactly the most mentally stable person. If I somehow developed a savior complex, I wouldn't know. I don't know if it actually matters, either way, but I want this to be right. I want us to be right. Healthy. She took a deep breath before finally giving an answer. I want us to go see Dinah, she said. Together. To make sure we stay good for each other. I want us to go see her once in a while, to make sure we stay good for each other. She grabbed my hands and looked me straight in the eyes before finishing, if you are okay with that, then yes. There is nothing in this world I want more than to be your girlfriend. This was so much more than I had expected. She didn't just want to be with me, she wanted us to be together. She didn't want to try to make us work, she wanted to make sure we worked. My eyes started to blur as well when I realized something else. this wasn't a spontaneous decision. She had thought about it for a while. Which meant she had had feelings for me for a while too. And she had thought hard about it. Much harder than I had. Yes, I said weakly, my voice no more than a whisper. Yes, I want that. The joy in her eyes made my heart dance. I couldn't believe that only a few hours ago, I had been worried that Millie would take her away from me. Eve loved me. Even if she didn't speak the word, I knew it in my heart. We stayed there staring into each other's eyes for a while. She had a silly smile on her face, and I was willing to bet that mine mirrored hers. The moisture in our eyes was certainly the same. Eventually, I spoke up again. Just one more thing, I said and leaned forward. Her eyes widened slightly before she closed them, and let my lips meet hers. My first kiss felt like sunlight on my lips. The yellow sun had nothing on Eve. She made me stronger than it ever could.